We are taught that Thanksgiving is a time for gratitude. We think of warm meals, family, traditions, and the safety of home. But if you are listening to this during your holiday, commute, prepare yourself. In these true Thanksgiving stories, we learn that sometimes the people sitting across the table aren't who we think they are. In the next 25 minutes, I'm going to take you through a compilation of true, disturbing Thanksgiving stories you never want to experience. From a dinner where a tyrant demands total silence, to a childhood prank that ends in a tragedy no one saw coming. These aren't just creepy encounters or your typical scary holiday stories. They are reminders that life has no rewind button. Sometimes the horror isn't a ghost in the hallway. It's the toxic family sitting right next to you. Let's get started with these Thanksgiving horror stories. It was the early 90s. My family had just moved to a new town, and I was going through that painful ordeal of being the new kid in high school. Most kids already had their established cliques, and I hadn't found my place yet. Then I met Tad. Tad was popular, amicable, and genuinely funny. Not just high school funny, but actually sharp. Yet, he was a drifter. He jumped from group to group, friends with everyone but belonging to no one. Eventually, he decided I was his person. That November, he handed me an envelope. Inside was a formal, beautifully printed invitation to spend Thanksgiving dinner at his house. Let's call them the Smiths. Looking back, Tad was cagey about it. He handed it to me almost as if he wanted me to say no. But my parents were insistent. They wanted me to make friends, so they sold me on the idea. When the big day came, I arrived at the Smiths' house excited, but when Tad answered the door, the vibe was wrong. He was dressed in a waistcoat with his hair slicked back, looking like he was dressed for church in the 1950s. I was standing there in my baggy 90s, kid clothes. Tad looked me up and down, and a shadow of pure worry crossed his face. He led me inside. The house was lifeless. It was too clean. No family portraits, no magazines, no clutter. It smelled sterile, like a show home that no one actually lived in. It felt like the setting of a psychological horror movie or one of those Thanksgiving nightmare stories you read about online. His mother, Jennifer, and his younger sister were there. They were polite but odd, and they looked thin, malnourished. Jennifer gently told me that the family usually dressed formal for dinner, but she hoped Mr. Smith would understand the miscommunication. Mr. Smith, I never learned his first name. He stood at the head of the dining table like a king. Tad whispered to me, terrified, "Call him, sir. Make eye contact. Only speak if he speaks to you first." I thought it was a prank, but the air in that room was so heavy you could choke on it. This was quickly turning into a real Thanksgiving horror. Mr. Smith didn't greet me, he just nodded. We stood behind our chairs while he droned on, with a grace that didn't mention God, only appreciation for what we have, directed at no one. When we finally sat, the food was pathetic. A few potatoes, limp vegetables, and a turkey that looked wrong. Mr. Smith piled his plate high. I followed the lead and reached for a potato. Whack! Without a word, Mr. Smith backhanded me across the face. I was speechless. It wasn't a punch, but a slap designed to humiliate. My face burned red. Mrs. Smith, trembling, whispered that the man of the house must eat his entire portion before anyone else touches the food. I sat there burning with fury, watching this man devour his food while his starving family watched. When we were finally allowed to eat, the nightmare got worse. The food was cold, the pasta was crunchy, and And the turkey, it was pink, slimy, undercooked. Halfway through the meal, my stomach began to cramp. The raw meat was taking its toll. Mr. Smith noticed me pushing food around my plate and demanded I eat. I finally spoke up. I said, "Sir, I have a stomach ache. Can I please call my parents?" The room went dead silent. Tad went pale. Mr. Smith stood up screaming, "How dare you!" He turned on Tad, blaming him for bringing a rude deviant into their home. Then he dragged my friend out of his chair. Right there in the dining room, he forced Tad over his knee and beat him. It was violent, it was humiliating, and he looked at me with a threat in his eyes. "Eat or you're next." I forced the food down. I survived until dessert, and then I was ordered to leave. I walked an hour home in the cold. When I got to my own house, my parents were laughing, eating a warm meal. I snapped at them, ran upstairs, and threw up for 3 days straight. When I told my dad what happened, he was furious. But he didn't storm over there. He told me to keep being Tad's friend, but never go back to that house. 6 months later, Mr. Smith disappeared. Rumors spread that he ran off with a woman or got into trouble with the law. Whatever happened, as soon as he was gone, Tad blossomed. He went from the class clown to valedictorian. To this day, Tad spends Thanksgiving with my family, and every year when we go around the table to give thanks, Tad says the same thing. "I'm thankful for whatever made my father leave." My dad gives me a wink. I don't know what he did, or if he did anything at all, but I know that sometimes bad people get what's coming to them, and for that I am thankful as hell. This happened in the late 2000s. I have 2 cousins, let's call them the twins, even though they were born 2 months apart to different mothers. My uncle had a complicated life, but he loved those boys. And the boys? They were chaos incarnate. They were pranksters, the kind of kids who loved exploding cigarettes and jump scares. It was always in good fun, but it was constant. I miss those days. I miss when the biggest problem was a loud noise or a plastic spider, because this fall horror story doesn't have a happy ending. That Halloween, the twins had worn these pumpkin ghoul costumes, skeleton onesies with creepy pumpkin masks. They loved them. They decided that since pumpkins are for Thanksgiving too, they would bring the masks to our family dinner for one last scare. Their plan was simple: hide in the kitchen pantry and jump out at whoever came in. That person happened to be my grandma. She was in her 70s, holding a massive, heavy boat of hot gravy. The twins burst out screaming. Grandma gasped. The heavy gravy boat slipped from her hands and shattered on the tile floor. Thick, hot gravy and glass splattered everywhere. Grandma clutched her chest and collapsed into a chair. The boys panicked, ripping off their masks, thinking they had given her a heart attack. But she was okay. She just needed a minute. The real tragedy happened a second later. My granddad heard the crash. He came running from the living room, panicked. He threw the kitchen door open and sprinted in, straight onto the slick gravy-covered tiles. I watched it happen from the hallway. He skidded. His feet went out from under him. He fell forward, hard. His face hit the corner of the table. People say death is instant. It wasn't. We watched him writhe on the floor in a pool of gravy and broken glass. We watched the life leave him while his wife and his grandson stood there helpless. Grandma died a few days later. We say it was a broken heart. The twins are adults now. One of them is okay, but the other, he's been in and out of rehab for years. They blamed themselves. No matter how many times we told them it was an accident, just kids being kids, they couldn't carry the weight of it. So, When you sit down for dinner this year, look at your family. Forgive the burnt turkey. Forgive the bad jokes. Be grateful they are still there. Because life can change in the blink of an eye over something as silly as a pumpkin mask. Now, every family has its political differences. My family? We lean conservative. My uncle, Ron, is the definition of it. Bumper stickers, NRA member, the works. But despite what the internet says, we are a loving family. We don't fight. We respect each other. That is, until Thanksgiving 2023, when my twin sister brought home Jack. From the moment Jack walked in, the air changed. He had this cold, snippy energy. He announced he was vegan just as dinner was served, which was fine. My mom scrambled to find him food. But then he piled his plate high with turkey and ham anyway. He wasn't vegan, he was just looking for a fight. He spent the meal poking the bear. He mocked my uncle's truck. He made fun of our values. He treated my sister like an accessory he could shove around. I watched my uncle Ron. Ron is a gun nut, sure, but he's also a disciplined man. He tried to deflect Jack's anger with jokes. He even started making up fake guns, talking about rail guns on train tracks, just to see if Jack was actually listening. He wasn't. Jack just wanted to scream. The tension snapped over a debate about concealed carry. Jack stood up so fast he knocked his chair over. My sister tried to calm him down and he shoved her hard. That was it. Uncle Ron stood up. He started shouting, telling Jack he was a weak little man. And then Jack reached into his jacket. He pulled out a pistol. The room froze. The silence was deafening. Here was this guy preaching about the dangers of guns, pointing a loaded weapon at my uncle across a plate of half-eaten turkey. It was like a scene out of the worst family gathering horror stories. Uncle Ron didn't flinch. He looked at Jack with a strange sense of peace. He said, calm as water, "You don't want to do this, son. You don't want to throw your life away over a political argument." For a second, it looked like Jack might actually listen. He lowered the gun slightly, sneering that he was the better man. My sister didn't wait for him to decide. She smashed a heavy antique vase right over the back of Jack's head. Jack went down like a sack of potatoes. The gun skittered across the floor and I dove for it. As I picked it up, I realized two things. First, my sister is a badass. And second, the safety was still on. Jack had no idea how to use the weapon he was threatening us with. He ended up banned from owning firearms and my sister got a restraining order. It turns out he was abusive in more ways than one. We laugh about it now. Uncle Ron loves telling the story. But when I saw that barrel leveled at my family, I wished we were the trigger-happy maniacs Jack thought we were. At least then, he would have known better than to threaten us. I run a Meals on Wheels service. Thanksgiving is my favorite time of year because I get to bring a hot meal and a smile to the elderly folks who don't have anyone else. In 2018, I had a client, an old sweet gentleman. He lived alone. No kids, no wife, just him. I'd prepared a special ham roast just for him. When I knocked on the door, I expected to see his beaming smile and his wobbly false teeth. Instead, a young man in his 20s answered. He smiled and told me he was the grandson. He said the old man was in the bath and invited me in to warm up the food. Now, I've been in this house 100 times. I walked into the kitchen, but something felt off. I looked at the photos on the wall. They were all of the old man. No family, photos, no pictures of a grandson. I called out, asking if the client was okay. The young guy yelled from upstairs, "Yeah, just helping him get dressed." But my client was fit. He didn't need help getting dressed. I turned off the oven. I decided to leave just to be safe. I walked to the front door, grabbed the handle and twisted. Locked. A deadbolt from the inside. My heart hammered against my ribs. I ran to the back door, deadbolted. I turned around and there he was. The grandson. He was standing in the living room, wearing nothing but his underwear and a sick, twisted grin. This was a spooky Thanksgiving encounter turning into a nightmare. He started speaking. Vile, disgusting things. He told me that since I was technically a home invader, he could do whatever he wanted to me. He said he might touch me, or he might bury me in the basement. He was high on something, his eyes wild and unblinking. He took a step toward me. I didn't scream. I didn't beg. I reached for the fireplace. I grabbed a heavy iron dustpan, the kind used for shoveling ash. When he lunged, I swung it with everything I had. Crack! I hit him square in the crotch. He howled and fell to the floor, and I didn't stop there. I brought the iron pan down again and again until he wasn't getting up. I found out later that my client, the sweet old man, had passed away the week before. This guy was a squatter, a junkie who had broken in and decided to turn Thanksgiving into a trap. I'm thankful for a lot of things, but mostly, I'm thankful I didn't miss with that dustpan. My dad is a goofball. He's the kind of guy who tries to be funny but just isn't. For years, he had this tradition. We had an old electric carving knife. You know, the ones that vibrate. It was so dull it couldn't cut butter. So every year, Dad would press the blade against his wrist and pretend to saw his hand off to scare the little kids. Then he'd reveal, ha, it wasn't even plugged in. It was stupid, it was harmless. Until the year Mum bought a new knife. She warned him. She said, don't do the trick, it's sharp. But Dad is arrogant. He figured he'd just be careful. Besides, the knife wasn't plugged into the wall, so it was safe, right? We were all gathered around the table, 15 of us. The turkey was steaming. Dad stood up, gave us a wink, and pressed the blade against his wrist. He pulled the trigger. He forgot one thing. The new knife was cordless. It didn't need to be plugged in. The blade roared to life. It sliced through his wrist like it was warm butter. The scream wasn't what I remember. It was the silence of my dad staring at his own hand, detached, while blood sprayed over the mashed potatoes, over the turkey, over my screaming aunt. It was the ultimate Thanksgiving weekend horror. I was the only one who moved. I shut the knife off, grabbed his hand, threw it in a bag of ice, and drove him to the ER. In the car, pale as a ghost, clutching his stump, my dad looked at me and whispered, "Thanks for giving me a hand, sweetie." If he wasn't bleeding out, I would have punched him. He has a prosthetic hook now, and yes, he still uses it to terrify my daughter's boyfriends. So, be thankful this year. Be thankful your turkey isn't pink. Be thankful your guests aren't armed. And please, keep the electric knives away from Dad. If you enjoyed these Let's Read Thanksgiving stories, please like and subscribe for more real horror content.